In the pre-dawn darkness of March 24th, 1603, three figures huddled over a corpse in Richmond Palace, sworn to absolute secrecy about what they were about to discover. As they began removing the elaborate costume that had defined Elizabeth I for nearly half a century, they uncovered a truth so horrifying that it would be buried with the Virgin Queen, sealed behind lead and lies for over 400 years. What lay beneath the white makeup and jeweled gowns wasn't merely the body of an elderly monarch ravaged by time and poison. It was evidence of something that challenged the very foundations of Tudor legitimacy, Protestant authority, and perhaps even the nature of the person who had ruled England for 45 years. The official story of Elizabeth's death speaks of a peaceful passing after a brief illness. A glorious reign concluded with dignity. But fragments of suppressed testimonies, coded letters, and documents that escaped destruction tell a different story entirely. They speak of a body so corrupted by decades of lead poisoning that the flesh had turned black and fallen away in chunks. They describe anatomical anomalies that defied medical explanation. They whisper of discoveries so disturbing that those who witnessed them were immediately separated, sworn to silence under threat of execution, and in one case, simply vanished from historical record. The story begins not in 1603, but decades earlier, when a young princess learned that survival in the Tudor court required transformation. Elizabeth's mother, Anne Boleyn, had been executed when Elizabeth was not yet 3 years old, beheaded on charges almost certainly fabricated by a king desperate for a male heir. This early trauma taught Elizabeth a crucial lesson. The female body was both a source of power and terrible vulnerability. She watched her father cycle through wives like playing cards, discarding or destroying them when they failed to produce sons. She observed her sister Mary's phantom pregnancies and the cruel mockery they inspired. These experiences shaped Elizabeth's decision to transform her body into something beyond ordinary flesh, a political symbol armored in lead paint and whalebone. By the time she took the throne in 1558, Elizabeth had already begun the physical transformation that would define and ultimately destroy her. The white lead makeup, known as Venetian ceruse, was applied daily in layers so thick that observers noted her face looked like a mask. This wasn't mere vanity, it was political theater. The pale complexion symbolized virginity, purity, and by extension, England's uncorrupted Protestant virtue standing against Catholic Europe. But the lead seeped through her skin, accumulating in her bones and organs, causing a slow poisoning that would manifest in increasingly horrific ways. The corsets Elizabeth wore were extreme even by Tudor standards. Reinforced with whalebone, steel, and sometimes wood, they were laced so tightly that servants had to brace their feet against the Queen's back to achieve the desired silhouette. The pressure exceeded 80 pounds per square inch at certain points, enough to crack ribs, displace organs, and over decades permanently deform the skeleton. Elizabeth wore these devices up to 16 hours daily for over 40 years. Medical analysis of similar surviving garments shows they would have compressed the lungs, displaced the liver, and caused chronic oxygen deprivation affecting every system in her body. The virgin persona Elizabeth cultivated served multiple purposes. Politically, it allowed her to remain unmarried and retain power that would have automatically transferred to a husband. But there may have been deeper reasons. Throughout her 20s and 30s, when pressure to marry was most intense, Elizabeth spoke of an unspecified impediment that made marriage impossible. Contemporary observers speculated about everything from childhood trauma to physical deformity. The truth, hidden beneath layers of clothing and cosmetics, would only be revealed in death. As the years passed, the toll of Elizabeth's toxic beauty regime became increasingly evident. The lead makeup was destroying her skin, creating deep pockmarks and patches of blue-black discoloration. Her teeth blackened and fell out, a classic sign of lead poisoning she attempted to hide by speaking with her hand over her mouth. Her hair thinned and fell out in patches, necessitating increasingly elaborate wigs. Beneath the magnificent gowns, her skin developed weeping sores that refused to heal, infected by the toxic dyes in her clothing and the constant pressure of her corsets. The irony was crushing. The very substances meant to preserve Elizabeth's image of eternal youth were destroying her from the outside in. Mercury-based cosmetics used to treat blemishes caused neurological damage. Belladonna drops that made her eyes appear larger slowly damaged her vision. She had become trapped in a toxic cycle, needing more makeup to cover the damage caused by makeup, each layer adding to the poison accumulating in her system. By the 1590s, Elizabeth's public appearances had become elaborate theatrical productions. She would spend 4 hours being dressed, painted, and wigged. Courtiers were kept at careful distances, close enough to be impressed by the overall effect, but not so close as to see through the illusion. She refused to look in mirrors, ordering them removed from her presence. The Virgin Queen had become a character Elizabeth performed, the real woman buried beneath layers of fabric, lead, and deception. Court physicians' carefully worded records paint a picture of a woman in constant physical distress. They describe treatments for mysterious swellings, applications of leeches, and regular administration of purgatives for corruption of the blood. One physician, writing in Latin in a private journal, described finding aberrations of nature that defy God's design when treating an abscess on her chest in 1592. He noted tissue showing signs of unnatural configuration and observed that the Queen's body seemed to possess characteristics of both Adam and Eve. The final decade of Elizabeth's life saw a dramatic acceleration of her decline. After a violent illness in 1593, she experienced episodes where she would forget where she was, speaking to people who weren't there, including her long-dead mother. These episodes, likely symptoms of lead-induced encephalopathy, were carefully hidden from public view. The Privy Council developed a system of doubles for public appearances when the Queen was indisposed. From a distance, dressed in the Queen's costumes, these substitutes maintained the illusion of royal presence. By 1599, Elizabeth had developed what physicians described as a great swelling of the belly, possibly a tumor or severe organ displacement from corseting. New gowns had to be constructed with hidden panels to accommodate her changing shape while maintaining the iconic silhouette. The toxic cosmetics had transformed her face into something barely human. A Venetian diplomat who glimpsed her without makeup described being so disturbed he had nightmares for weeks, writing that her face was covered with deep furrows and holes, and her complexion was blue-grey, like unto a corpse. The year 1602 brought new horrors. Elizabeth suffered what appears to have been a series of strokes. Her speech became slurred, she showed weakness on her left side, and most humiliatingly, she began losing control of bodily functions. Special garments were designed to hide these episodes. She would be dressed, painted, and positioned for public appearances like a puppet, with handlers ready to support her if she faltered. By winter of 1602-1603, Elizabeth was essentially a living corpse. She developed what physicians called putrid ulcers on her legs that emitted such a foul odor that servants burned herbs constantly to make the royal chambers bearable. These ulcers had turned gangrenous, the flesh literally rotting while she still lived. Strange growths appeared on her body, described as like unto barnacles, possibly tumors or severe reactions to decades of toxic exposure. In her final months, Elizabeth's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would stand for hours in one position, claiming that if she sat or lay down, death would take her. She refused food, as painful ulcers in her throat made swallowing agony. When she did eat, she immediately vomited blood and what physicians called black bile. Her weight plummeted, and beneath the padded clothing, her body became skeletal. The most closely guarded secret of these final weeks was the discovery of what physicians referred to in coded Latin as monstrum in corpore, a monster in the body. A growth near her left breast, the size of a goose egg, purple-black, with visible veins that pulsed independently. When lanced, it bled black blood with a metallic smell. Some speculated it was cancer, others a parasitic growth. Most disturbing were reports it contained what appeared to be hair and teeth, suggesting a teratoma. March 23rd, 1603, brought the final crisis. Elizabeth suffered a massive seizure lasting nearly an hour, foam tinged with blood pouring from her mouth. When it ended, she lay still for so long, many believed she had died. Then, in a moment of terrible clarity, she whispered to Robert Cecil, "I am tied with a chain of iron about my neck. The case is altered with me." The The Queen's final hours remain shrouded in mystery. Some accounts describe her body contorting into impossible positions. Others speak of strange sounds emanating from within her. Dr. Richard Manningham, present at the death, later wrote, "The skin did seem to move of its own accord, as if creatures crawled beneath. When death finally came, it was not the peaceful passing of a Christian soul, but the violent expulsion of something desperately clinging to life." Death was recorded at 3 o'clock in the morning, March 24, 1603. What happened immediately after would become one of history's most closely guarded secrets. The body was wrapped in cerecloth before rigor mortis set in, placed in a lead coffin, immediately soldered shut. No death mask was made. No lying in state permitted. The witnesses were sworn to silence under threat of execution. The preparation of the body was conducted by only 3 people: Dr. Manningham, Lady Helena Snakenborg, and an unnamed minister. What they discovered beneath the layers of clothing and cosmetics necessitated one of history's most comprehensive cover-ups. The removal of the Queen's garments revealed fabric fused with skin through dried blood and pus. The corset had embedded itself into her flesh. The whalebone stays lodged against her ribs. When removed, it pulled away chunks of necrotized tissue. The shape of her ribcage had been permanently deformed by tight lacing. The lower ribs were compressed inward and upward, displacing internal organs. Her liver had been pushed into her chest cavity, her stomach compressed to a fraction of normal size. The organs themselves were described as blackened and withered, showing severe damage from decades of lead poisoning. Removal of the famous white makeup revealed skin covered in a network of black veins forming intricate patterns. Where lead had eaten deepest, there were holes straight through to bone. The skull showed severe deformation from lead poisoning, with sections of bone softened and warped. Most disturbing was a soft spot on the crown, like an infant's fontanelle, that had pulsed with its own rhythm. The examination of the lower body revealed the secret that perhaps explained Elizabeth's virginity. The witnesses described sexual organs that were neither fully of man nor woman, but some terrible amalgamation of both. The external genitalia were ambiguous, potentially indicating a disorder of sexual development. The vaginal opening, if it existed, was sealed with very old scar tissue. The womb was shriveled like a dried plum, with strange calcifications throughout. This discovery raised immediate questions about Elizabeth's entire identity. Was this why she never married? Was this the impediment she had mentioned? Or was this evidence that the person who ruled England for 45 years had been neither fully male nor fully female? The implications were staggering. Every law passed, every noble created, every decision made could be questioned if the Queen didn't fit Tudor society's rigid gender categories. Dr. Manningham described finding impossible anatomies, organs that shouldn't exist, connecting tissues defying medical understanding. He found what appeared to be a second, smaller heart near the stomach, lung tissue in the abdomen, and bones where none should be. The brain, examined through a small incision, showed extensive lead damage and contained small, hard nodules that, when cut open, contained what looked like tiny pearls or eggs. The blood drained from the body was not dark red, but a viscous black substance with metallic sheen, consistency like tar, smelling of rotting metal. When it touched silver instruments, they tarnished immediately. Some seemed to move independently, crawling along the table before becoming still. The spinal examination revealed severe scoliosis and compressed vertebrae from corseting, but also bony growths protruding from vertebrae resembling small horns. The skin over these growths was thick and scaly, almost reptilian. These discoveries painted a picture of a being that had transcended, or descended below, normal human physiology. The 3 witnesses faced an impossible decision. Revealing their discoveries would destroy Protestant succession legitimacy, potentially trigger civil war, and provide Catholic enemies with propaganda, proving the Protestant Queen was cursed by God. The decision was made to hide everything. The body was wrapped in multiple layers of cerecloth, placed in a lead coffin, immediately soldered shut, then placed in another coffin sealed with lead and mercury, wrapped in chains and marked with religious symbols. The witnesses were separated, forbidden from meeting or corresponding. Manningham was sent to Scotland under an assumed name. Snackenborg entered a convent with a vow of silence. The minister simply disappeared. Everything that touched the body was burned. The examination table was destroyed. Even the floor where the Queen's blood had fallen was replaced. Every physical trace was eliminated. The cleanup of records was systematic. Physicians' notes vanished. Ladies-in-waiting's accounts were confiscated and destroyed. Private letters mentioning the Queen's health were seized. The official account was sanitized. A peaceful death after brief illness, showing only normal signs of age. The Bisley Boy legend suggests Elizabeth died as a child and was replaced by a male substitute. While most historians dismiss this as fantasy, the physical evidence gives the theory disturbing credibility. The ambiguous genitalia, masculine bone structure, and abnormal organs align disturbingly with the possibility that Elizabeth was biologically male or intersex. The extreme measures hiding her body, both in life and death, gain new meaning through this lens. Elizabeth's famous statement, "I have the body but of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king," takes different meaning if acknowledging a truth about her physical nature. Her refusal to allow physicians to examine her below the neck suggests someone protecting a dangerous secret rather than mere modesty. Modern medical analysis suggests multiple possibilities: severe lead and mercury poisoning causing mutations, a chromosomal disorder affecting sexual development, or even a teratoma that grew throughout her life. Some researchers propose Elizabeth suffered from complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, appearing female externally but being genetically male. Others suggest she may have had congenital adrenal hyperplasia, causing ambiguous genitalia and masculine features. The sealed tomb in Westminster Abbey has never been opened for modern examination, despite numerous requests from historians and scientists. The British government consistently refuses, citing respect for the deceased and preservation of historical monuments. But many suspect the real reason is fear of what might be discovered. Elizabeth remains the only English monarch whose remains have never been examined or moved. Recent non-invasive studies using ground-penetrating radar have revealed anomalies in the tomb's construction: multiple lead layers, unusual void spaces, and metallic signatures suggesting chains or additional barriers. These findings align with accounts of the extraordinary measures taken to seal the body. X-ray analysis of Elizabeth's surviving clothing shows modifications consistent with hiding physical abnormalities, extra padding in specific areas, unusual structural supports, and evidence of repeated alterations to accommodate changing body shape. Chemical analysis of items Elizabeth touched reveals extraordinarily high levels of lead, mercury, and arsenic, far exceeding what would be expected from cosmetics alone. Hair samples from her wigs show lead levels that would have caused severe neurological damage. Makeup samples from her personal collection contained lead concentrations that would be immediately fatal if ingested, yet she applied these to her skin daily for decades. The psychological profile that emerges from contemporary accounts suggests someone living with an enormous secret. Elizabeth's famous virginity, her refusal to marry despite intense political pressure, her extreme privacy about her body, her violent reactions to any questioning of her authority, all consistent with someone protecting a dangerous truth. Her statement, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too," perhaps contained more literal truth than metaphor. The cover-up's success is remarkable. For over 4 centuries, the truth about Elizabeth's body has remained hidden. The few who knew took their secrets to the grave. Documents were destroyed, witnesses silenced, and a sanitized version of history was written. The Virgin Queen became a symbol of English greatness, her image carefully curated to inspire rather than horrify. But fragments of truth survived. Lady Snackenborg's encrypted journal, decoded only in the 20th century, speaks of seeing not the body of our late queen, but something that wore her shape as a disguise. Dr. Manningham's medical writings reference conditions that should not be possible in God's creation. The unnamed minister left only a cryptic note in his Bible: "I have seen proof that the devil can wear a crown. God forgive us for what we have hidden." The implications extend beyond Elizabeth herself. If the person who ruled England for 45 years was not what they seemed, what does this mean for the legitimacy of every decision made during that reign? The establishment of Protestantism in England, the defeat of the Spanish Armada, the foundations of the British Empire, all accomplished by someone whose very identity may have been a lie. The mystery deepens when examining Elizabeth's relationships. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, and her closest companion, once remarked she had a secret that would shake the very foundations of Christendom. Mary, Queen of Scots, wrote that Elizabeth was less than a woman, more than a woman, something between and beyond. These statements, long dismissed as political rhetoric, gain new significance in light of the physical discoveries. Financial records from Elizabeth's household show unusual expenditures. Payments to special tailors for garments of unique construction, purchases of excessive cloth, regular payments to craftsmen specializing in devices for the adjustment of the human form. These could refer to normal royal extravagance or document the creation of elaborate disguises. The response of foreign ambassadors provides additional clues. Many commented on Elizabeth's unusual height, broad shoulders, deep voice, and masculine mannerisms. The Spanish ambassador wrote that Elizabeth had the bearing of a man in woman's clothing. The French envoy noted her hands like a stonecutter's and stride like a soldier's. These observations, filtered through diplomatic courtesy, suggest physical characteristics that stood out even in an era of different beauty standards. Elizabeth's own writings reveal someone struggling with identity. Her poetry speaks of masks, disguises, and hidden truths. She wrote, "I am not what I appear to be. The face you see is not truly me. Beneath the crown and royal array lies something that must hidden stay." Long interpreted as metaphorical, these lines perhaps contained literal confession. The medical symptoms Elizabeth displayed throughout life align with various conditions that could explain the discoveries. Chronic lead poisoning would account for many symptoms, but not the anatomical anomalies. Genetic conditions affecting sexual development could explain the ambiguous genitalia, but not the other abnormalities. The presence of what appeared to be a teratoma suggests yet another layer of medical complexity. Some researchers propose Elizabeth suffered from multiple conditions simultaneously. A chromosomal disorder affecting sexual development, combined with decades of lead and mercury poisoning creating mutations, possibly complicated by a teratoma or other growth. This perfect storm of medical conditions could have created the impossible anatomies discovered in death. The toxic beauty regime Elizabeth followed would have been dangerous for anyone, but potentially catastrophic for someone with underlying genetic conditions. The lead makeup, mercury treatments, and arsenic-based cosmetics could have triggered mutations and abnormal growths. The extreme corseting could have exacerbated any skeletal abnormalities. The psychological stress of maintaining such a deception could have contributed to the mental deterioration witnessed in her final years. The question remains, if Elizabeth was indeed not what she appeared, when did the deception begin? The Bisley Boy legend suggests childhood replacement, but another possibility exists. Elizabeth may have been born with ambiguous characteristics that became more pronounced over time, forcing increasingly desperate measures to maintain a feminine appearance. The toxic cosmetics, initially used for beauty, may have become necessary to hide developing masculine features. The succession to James VI of Scotland was remarkably smooth, suggesting powerful forces were determined to prevent any questioning of Elizabeth's legitimacy that might destabilize the transfer of power. James himself may have been informed of certain truths, explaining his immediate order that Elizabeth's tomb never be disturbed. The new king's first acts included destroying many documents from Elizabeth's reign and pensioning off her closest servants with strict silence agreements. The Catholic Church's unusual silence about Elizabeth after her death is noteworthy. Despite decades of calling her a heretic and bastard, Catholic propagandists made surprisingly little of her death. Some historians suggest a deal was struck. silence about Elizabeth's physical state in exchange for greater tolerance of Catholics under James. If true, this implies the Church knew something that even they considered too dangerous to reveal. Modern forensic techniques could definitively answer these questions, but Elizabeth's tomb remains sealed. Proposals for examination have been rejected repeatedly. The official reason is preserving historical integrity, but many suspect the real fear is what might be discovered. The lead coffin would have preserved the body remarkably well. Modern DNA analysis could determine genetic sex, identify chromosomal abnormalities, and detect genetic conditions. Chemical analysis could quantify the poison levels. Skeletal examination could confirm the deformities. Until such examination occurs, we have only fragments, testimonies from those who risked everything to record what they saw, physical evidence from surviving artifacts, and the telling gaps in official records. These fragments paint a picture of a person who transcended or defied conventional categorization, who maintained an impossible deception through will, poison, and the complicity of those who understood that sometimes truth is too dangerous to reveal. The story of Elizabeth I's body is ultimately about the price of power and the lengths to which individuals and institutions will go to maintain foundational myths. The Virgin Queen, who embodied English Protestant virtue, may have been neither virgin nor queen, nor even conventionally human by the end. The body that symbolized national identity was itself a lie, corrupted and transformed by the very efforts to preserve it. What lies sealed in Westminster Abbey is not just the remains of a monarch, but evidence of one of history's greatest deceptions. The woman celebrated for saying, "I have the body but of a weak and feeble woman," may have had a body that was anything but. The queen who refused to marry, citing a mysterious impediment, may have been protecting a secret that would have destroyed not just her reign, but the entire legitimacy of the English state. The toxic transformation of Elizabeth Tudor from flesh and blood person to symbolic icon came at a terrible physical cost. The lead slowly poisoned her, the mercury drove her mad, the arsenic ate away at her flesh, the corsets deformed her skeleton, the clothing hid increasingly horrific mutations. By the end, what remained was barely human, a grotesque parody of femininity held together by will and cosmetics, a monster wearing the mask of a queen. But perhaps most disturbing is not what Elizabeth became, but what her transformation reveals about power itself. The body of the monarch, supposedly divine and inviolate, was actually corrupt, poisoned, possibly fraudulent. The Virgin Queen, who symbolized purity, was hiding decay and deformity. The Protestant icon may have been evidence of divine curse rather than blessing. These contradictions were known, documented, and deliberately hidden, because revealing them would have destroyed the careful fiction upon which government rested. The three witnesses to the truth, Dr. Manningham, Lady Snakenborg, and the unnamed minister, carried their burden to their graves. They had seen something that challenged their understanding of nature, divinity, and sovereignty. They chose silence over truth, stability over revelation. Their decisions shaped 4 centuries of history, allowing the myth of Gloriana to flourish while the reality rotted in a lead-sealed tomb. Today, Elizabeth remains entombed in Westminster Abbey, her secrets protected by layers of lead, law, and legend. The Virgin Queen has become so integral to English national identity that revealing the truth about her body would be traumatic even now. The woman who declared, "I have no desire to make windows into men's souls," has had the window into her own physical reality permanently shuttered. The mystery endures because it must. Some truths are too dangerous to reveal, some myths too necessary to dispel. Elizabeth understood this better than anyone, transforming her body into a political statement that outlasted her physical form. She became immortal not despite her body's corruption, but because of it, the ultimate transformation of weak flesh into enduring symbol. As we close this investigation into one of history's most disturbing secrets, we're left with questions that may never be answered. Was Elizabeth Vine who she claimed to be? What was the true nature of the body hidden beneath the lead paint and royal regalia? What discovery was so terrible that it required the complete erasure of evidence and testimony? The answers lie sealed in Westminster Abbey, protected by centuries of silence and the understanding that some secrets are better left buried. The terrifying secret of the Virgin Queen, finally exposed after 400 years, is not a single revelation, but a cascading series of horrors. A body destroyed by toxic cosmetics, a skeleton deformed by clothing, organs that shouldn't exist, blood that defied nature, sexual characteristics that challenge binary understanding, and overarching all, the possibility that the person who ruled England for 45 years was not Elizabeth Tudor at all, but someone or something else entirely. This is the price of myth-making, the cost of maintaining illusions of power. Elizabeth sacrificed her body to become a symbol, and in death, that body threatened to destroy everything she had built. The secret was buried with her, sealed in lead and silence, a truth too terrible for Tudor England to face. 400 years later, it remains too terrible still. The Virgin Queen endures as legend precisely because the reality of what she became, or what she always was, must never be fully known. In the end, perhaps Elizabeth's greatest achievement was not defeating the Spanish Armada or establishing England as a world power, but successfully hiding the truth about her own body for over 4 centuries. She controlled her image so completely that even in death, even as her corpse revealed impossible horrors, she managed to ensure those revelations would be suppressed. The Virgin Queen's final victory was over truth itself. The tomb in Westminster Abbey stands as a monument, not just to Elizabeth V, but to the power of secrets, the necessity of myths, and the terrible price of maintaining illusions. Inside, wrapped in lead and legend, lies evidence of a transformation so complete, so horrifying, that those who witnessed it chose to erase it from history rather than let it be known. There, in the darkness, the truth about the Virgin Queen waits, patient and terrible, a secret that after 400 years remains too dangerous to reveal.